In the 1850s, right, the greatest scientific minds in Europe were meticulously measuring electrical currents. They were mapping out these rigid mathematical laws of physics and basically ushering in this whole era of cold, hard data.
Oh, absolutely. It was all about empirical observation.
Right. And watching them from the sidelines was this French occultist who essentially just smiled, looked at their glowing wires and twitching instruments, and said, "Congratulations, you've just invented the vocabulary to prove that magic is real."
It is, honestly, a phenomenal historical paradox.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the dawn of modern empirical science, right? In an era that was supposed to, completely eradicate mysticism and superstition.
Yeah, bury it for good.
Exactly. Yet here is this thinker looking at the cutting edge technology of the Industrial Revolution and claiming, well, actually, this is the ultimate validation of ancient esoteric practice.
And that tension is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We're exploring a really fascinating set of notes curated by researcher Ben Hod, drawn from the Eliphas Levi School of High Magic Curriculum.
Yes, specifically Key 2, Unit 2, which focuses on science.
Right. We are going to look at how this legendary occultist, Eliphas Levi, didn't just reject modern physics. I mean, he hijacked it.
He absolutely did. And to really understand how he did that, we're going to explore a premise that fundamentally reorients how you interact with the world.
Which is a pretty big promise, but yeah.
It is, but it pays off.
Right.
We're going to break down how the universe and, most importantly, your own biological and psychological makeup operates as a living, breathing battery driven by relentless dual polarity.
So if this premise holds true, it means turning on a device isn't just mundane engineering. It's a cosmic principle playing out in miniature.
Right.
But if we're going to understand how you or I function as living batteries, we first need to understand the invisible medium that Levi claimed these batteries were tapping into.
The famous astral light.
Yeah, exactly. And I know alchemists have been hinting at this for centuries, but how did Levi actually define it in the context of the 19th century?
Well, Levi referred to the astral light as the great magical agent. So to strip away the mysticism for a second, just imagine it as this universal, highly plastic medium.
Plastic meaning it can be molded.
Right. It's the primordial, invisible canvas upon which all of creation is painted. Mm-hmm. And the most vital characteristic of this medium is that it is completely impressionable.
Meaning it reacts to us.
Exactly.
Right.
It responds to and is actively molded by directed human will and thought.
That sounds like he's proposing this invisible metaphysical fluid that just, permeates everything. So is he saying that when a scientist measures an electrical spark, they're actually just measuring a ripple in this fluid?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Levi argued that what the scientists of his day called physical forces, so like electricity and magnetism, were really merely masks.
Just the surface layer.
Yeah, they were the visible pulse, the tangible edge of this singular cosmic fluid asserting itself across raw physical matter. He basically believed the scientists were measuring the footprints, but completely ignoring the invisible creature making them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the astral light acts like a fluid, we can look at it the way we look at sound, right?
Okay, sure.
So, if I speak, my vocal cords create mechanical vibrations, and those travel through the medium of the air as sound waves. Is Levi arguing that human intention creates, similar energetic ripples through the medium of the astral light?
That is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it. I mean, think of it this way. If the universe is a video game, scientists are measuring the pixels on the screen.
Right, the phenomena, the electricity.
Yeah, but Levi is saying the magician is the one actually holding the controller and writing the code, which is the astral light. And Levi pointed directly to the language scientists were using to prove his point.
He used their own words against them?
He did.
Yeah.
He relied heavily on the etymology of their own terms. Take the word electricity itself. The ancient Greek root is electron, which simply translates to amber, that yellow fossilized tree resin.
Right, because when ancient people rubbed amber with animal fur, it would suddenly attract feathers or dust?
Yes. It developed this quiet, invisible hunger. They didn't understand the atomic mechanism of a static charge, obviously, but they recognized a latent force waking up. So they named the phenomenon after the amber itself.
Oh!
Levi saw this as evidence that the ancients inherently understood energy was alive. Similarly, magnetism traces back to magnesia.
Which was a region rich in lodestones, right? Those naturally magnetic rocks.
Exactly. But Levi noted that the root concept connects deeply to the Persian word magus, the priest, the master of natural operations.
So the very words scientists were using to describe cold physics were deeply, deeply embedded in ancient magic.
They were. I mean, even the word phenomenon, which scientists use to describe these observable forces, comes from the Greek phenomenon, meaning that which appears or shows itself.
Just the appearance, not the root cause.
Right. Levy is constantly reminding his readers that a physical spark is just the surface appearance.
Yeah.
The underlying reality is the astral light. So when a magical practitioner commands an operation, they aren't like breaking the laws of physics.
They're just using a different layer of them.
Exactly. They are acting as a conscious living circuit, directing these invisible currents through concentrated thought.
That is a staggering claim, though. I mean, you have heavyweight scientists like Michael Faraday and André-Marie Ampère laying down strict mathematical formulas for electromagnetism.
The giants of the era.
Yeah. So if I'm a serious physicist in Paris in 1855, I'm looking at Levy and thinking he is completely delusional. How did he defend himself against a scientific community that demanded hard proof?
Well, he defended himself by pointing directly at their own workbenches. He didn't just, retreat into abstract philosophy. He used the most cutting-edge physical technology of the 1800s as his absolute proof.
What was?
The galvanic battery.
Wait, he used a battery to prove magic.
He did. But to fully grasp the cultural impact of this, we really need to understand the absolute shockwave that electricity sent through society at the time.
Oh yeah, it must have been terrifying.
It was. In the late 18th century, the Italian physician Luigi Galvani conducted experiments where he applied electrical currents to the severed legs of frogs, and the dead limbs would violently twitch and kick.
Which is horrifying. That's actually the exact inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It completely blurred the line between biology and mechanics.
It terrified and thrilled the public. Galvani theorized he had discovered animal electricity, this invisible vital spark inherent to living flesh.
Right.
Now, shortly after, Alessandro Volta corrected him. Volta proved the current wasn't coming from the frog's flesh itself, but from the contact of the two dissimilar metals Galvani happened to be using, which were copper and zinc.
So it was just a chemical reaction.
Yes, and this realization led Volta to invent the first true battery, the voltaic pile.
So Volta essentially stripped the magic away. He said, it's not a mystical life force in the frog. It's just a chemical reaction between two metals.
That was the scientific consensus, yes. But the cultural ghost of Galvani's twitching frogs lingered. The idea that an invisible fluid could animate dead matter was just burned into the public consciousness.
People couldn't let it go.
No, they couldn't. So when Levy looked at Volta's battery, he didn't see cold, inert technology. He saw a magical instrument performing a cosmic ritual. He famously wrote that the action of metals in a galvanic battery are undeniable and perpetual revelations.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the word revelation carries massive theological weight. You don't use that word to describe a mundane chemical reaction.
No, you absolutely don't. The term comes from the Latin revelare, which means to draw back the veil. For centuries, revelation was strictly the domain of religion.
Right, prophets on mountain talks, divine scripture, the voice of God.
Exactly. And Levy cheekily snatches this sacred concept right off the church altar and drops it directly onto the electrician's workbench.
Wow.
To him, a wired needle moving on a dial isn't just measuring voltage. It is actively drawing back the veil on the hidden metaphysical architecture of creation.
Wait, so if the workbench is an altar, is Levy essentially saying that the standard AA battery sitting in a TV remote right now is a tiny magical altar conducting a sacred cosmic marriage? Does that mean science and magic are exactly the same thing to him?
In a literal hermetic sense, yes. Levy described the interaction within a battery as the marriage of copper and zinc. He wasn't just being poetic, he was invoking classical alchemy, where metals are not inert slabs of matter.
They have personalities almost.
Right, they are dynamic living substances with specific gendered polarities.
Okay, let's break down that chemistry, because the notes specifically highlight this copper and zinc relationship. Why those two metals?
In the Hermetic tradition, copper is bound to the planet Venus. Philosophically, it represents the receptive, the yielding, the feminine principle. And scientifically speaking, in the context of a battery, copper acts as the cathode.
So it catches the charge.
Right. It is eager to catch and receive electrons. Zinc, on the other hand, is associated with elemental fire in the martial forces. It is active, volatile, the masculine projective principle. Scientifically, zinc acts as the anode. It wants to throw or project electrons.
So zinc pushes and copper pulls.
Exactly. Zinc cannot release its energy without a willing vessel, and copper cannot receive without a willing projector. When Levy calls their contact in the acid a marriage, he is pointing to the Greek concept of hieros gamos, a sacred cosmic union.
A sacred marriage.
Yes. The chemical reaction that powers a light bulb is, at its metaphysical core, an erotic encounter between opposing cosmic forces. Force requires friction. Power requires dualism.
That completely recontextualizes how I look at basic electronics.
Yeah.
But it also exposes a massive ideological rift, right? Because if a materialist scientist and an occultist are staring at the exact same copper and zinc reacting in a jar, the scientist just sees an exchange of electrons.
Yeah.
And the occultist sees a sacred cosmic marriage. How did those two worldviews coexist in 19th century Paris?
Well, they largely didn't coexist peacefully. It was a total intellectual battleground. This was the era of Auguste Comte, the father of positivism.
Right.
Comte vehemently argued that humanity had finally outgrown religion and metaphysics. In his view, human thought had evolved through primitive theological stages and had finally arrived at the positive stage, where only empirical observation, hard mathematics, and material facts mattered.
So science was actively trying to bury magic once and for all.
Exactly.
So Levy is surrounded by thinkers who view his entire philosophy as this obsolete, embarrassing relic of the Dark Ages. How does he respond to that kind of arrogance?
With a brilliant intellectual coup, really. Instead of fighting science, he claims ownership of its discoveries. He responded to the positivists with a deeply provocative statement. He said, "May scientists search and discover, the Kabbalists will explain."
I love the audacity of that. He's telling the greatest minds of his generation, you keep dissecting the parts, and we will tell you what it actually means.
It was incredibly bold. And it hinged on the linguistic roots of how these two disciplines operated. Let's look at the etymology again. The word science derives from the Latin scientia, which at its root means to split, to sever, or to dissect.
To break things apart.
Right.
Yeah.
The fundamental method of material science is division, breaking the universe down into smaller and smaller measurable parts to understand how they work.
Which makes sense. I mean, you can't understand a biological organism without dissecting the tissue, the cells, the molecules.
True, but division inherently destroys the living whole. Now contrast that with the word Kabbalist, which derives from the Hebrew word Kabbalah. That word translates to that which is received.
Received, okay.
Receiving implies a vessel that can hold an unbroken, unified transmission. It doesn't break things apart. It holds the totality of the cosmic order.
So if science is the act of splitting the universe apart to catalog its pieces, and mysticism is the act of receiving the unbroken whole, it's like studying a piece of music, right?
Oh, I like where this is going.
Yeah, so science is like someone taking apart a car engine, or, well, sticking with the music. The scientist isolates every single frequency, graphs the sound waves, and calculates the math of the acoustic resonance. But they miss the emotion.
Yes.
The Kabbalist is the only one actually sitting in the concert hall, letting the symphony wash over them and understanding why it was written in the first place. You need the engineer to build the instruments, but you need the mystic to experience the music. Or, like the car analogy, you need the mechanic to build it, but you need the mystic to turn the key and give it purpose.
That is a phenomenal analogy. You really hit the nail on the head. Levy argued that a scientist who refuses to look beyond their data is just a blind clerk cataloging machinery they don't understand.
Right.
But conversely, a mystic who ignores the hard discoveries of physics is a delusional dreamer trapped in fantasy. You need both. You need the empirical splitting of scientia and the holistic receiving of Kabbalah.
It sounds like he's reviving a very old philosophical framework and just, updating the software with 19th century physics.
He is. He's actively reviving the Neoplatonic worldview, championed by Renaissance thinkers like Plotinus and Marsilio Ficino. They believed the entire universe was held together by a sympathetic web, a grand chain of being. And they used two specific terms for this, affinities and antipathies.
How did they define those practically?
Well, affinity comes from the Latin anus, meaning bordering upon or related by marriage. It describes the natural gravitational pull of different forces toward union, like copper drawing and zinc's electrons.
And antipathy.
Antipathy comes from the Greek antipathos, meaning against feeling. It is the innate repulsion that keeps forces distinct, preventing the universe from just, collapsing into a single undifferentiated mass.
So tension is necessary for existence.
Absolutely. Without the push and pull of affinity and antipathy, there's no movement, no life, no astral light. Levy took this ancient magical doctrine of sympathetic resonance and pointed out that scientists had just proven it in the laboratory.
That's brilliant.
Right. Chemical bonding and magnetic repulsion weren't just physical laws. They were the physical evidence of ancient magic in action.
Okay, so if this cosmic law of polarity holds the physical universe together, does Levy believe it also dictates how human beings operate? Because the notes from Ben Hod heavily emphasize that this isn't just about batteries in a lab, it scales down to the listener's own biology and psychology.
Yes, and this is where Levy's philosophy becomes intensely personal and applicable to you. He argued that just as the Earth pulls down through gravity and radiates out through geomagnetic currents, the human body does the exact same thing. We are literally living batteries governed by a force he termed androgynous magnetism.
Androgynous magnetism. I want to be careful here because when we use gendered terms in esoteric texts, it can get, well, confusing. What exactly does he mean by that?
To understand that, we have to look briefly at Franz Anton Mesmer, a really controversial figure in pre-revolutionary Paris. Mesmer scandalized society by claiming an invisible animal fluid bathed all living bodies, and that he could manipulate it to heal people.
Oh, mesmerism.
Yes. The scientific establishment completely labeled him a charlatan. But Levy looked at Mesmer's work and realized he had simply stumbled onto the astral light, but he was wrapping it in this clunky, mechanistic terminology.
So Mesmer's animal magnetism was real, he just didn't understand the underlying cosmic code he was accessing.
Exactly. Levy rebranded it as androgynous magnetism, using the Greek roots and veros for man and gyne for woman. But he is emphatically not talking about physical anatomy or biological sex here.
Right.
He is talking about the fundamental polarities of force, the active projecting principle and the receptive yielding principle. These exist in perpetual dynamic tension within every single human being, regardless of their gender.
This reminds me of Paracelsus, the Renaissance physician. Didn't he have a theory about an internal human magnet?
He did. Paracelsus proposed the beautiful idea that the human soul possesses an internal lodestone capable of pulling starlight down into the material earth. We are the conduit between the cosmos and the dirt. And Levy takes this idea and maps it directly onto the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is a structural diagram of how divine energy flows into manifestation.
I know the tree of life can be incredibly dense for those who haven't studied Kabbalah. How does Levy use it to explain human polarity?
Well, at its core, the tree of life is balanced by two main pillars. On the left side, you have the column of severity, anchored by a sphere called Bina. This represents the intellectual power. It is analytical, active, projective, and fundamentally restrictive.
Like science.
Yes, it sets boundaries. It divides things to understand them, much like Scientia.
It's the zinc. It pushes, it structures, it defines limits.
Yes, precisely. And on the right side, you have the column of mercy, anchored by a sphere called Chokmah. This represents the emotive power. It is expansive, receptive, feeling, and attracting. It seeks union without boundaries.
It's the copper. It receives and connects. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, in a practical sense? Because Levy describes the interplay between these two pillars within your own mind as a precise law of energetic hydraulics, right? Your psychological state is literally managing a closed-loop electrical circuit.
Right, it's a closed circuit.
Okay, let's make this tangible. What happens if a person is entirely dominated by that left pillar of severity? Let's say someone who is incredibly rigid, who intellectualizes everything, needs constant control, and completely shuts down their vulnerable emotions. What happens to their internal battery?
Well, according to Levy's energetic hydraulics, if you oversaturate your intellect with analytical rigidity, you become purely projective. You are throwing energy out, but you have severed the emotive current that allows you to receive.
Because you shut off the copper.
Exactly. Because a circuit must be closed to function, you literally collapse your own magnetic field. You lose the ability to attract serendipity, connection, or new insights from the world around you. Your battery goes dead from output with no input.
That is a profound way to diagnose intellectual burnout. What about the reverse, though? What if someone ignores the intellectual pillar and just lets their emotions rage completely unchecked, like someone who is entirely reactive, sweeping from one intense feeling to the next with no logical anchor?
If the emotive power of mercy operates without the stabilizing architecture of the intellect, the practitioner becomes pure copper. They are entirely receptive to every chaotic current in the astral light.
They just absorb everything.
They absorb and absorb until the voltage overloads the system. They are swept away by obsession, frenzy, or hysteria. The unregulated current essentially blows their psychological circuit.
Just destroys the vessel, which, proves that for Levy, magic has absolutely nothing to do with waving a wand or chanting in Latin.
Nothing at all.
Hmm.
True magic is profound psychological equilibrium. It is the conscious, supreme science of energetic balance.
It completely reframes the definition of a magician. I mean, we are taught to think of magic as breaking the laws of physics, right?
Yeah.
Levitating objects or creating fire from thin air.
Right, the supernatural stuff.
Yeah, but Levy is arguing that true magic is the absolute mastery of natural law. It's knowing exactly when to radiate force, when to be the zinc and assert your will, and when to be the copper, quietly sitting back to receive and attract.
And achieving that equilibrium is what makes a person a master of both the seen and unseen currents. When your intellect and your emotions are perfectly balanced, you become a living capacitor. You can safely hold, direct, and utilize the immense power of the astral light without it destroying you.
What an unbelievable journey this has been. I mean, we started with the friction of amber in ancient Greece, moved through the terrifying twitching frogs of Galvani's lab, sat at the marriage altar of a copper and zinc battery, and finally arrived at the realization that the highest form of magic is the mastery of our own internal psychological balance.
It really is a phenomenal synthesis of science and spirit. And as we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final implication of Levy's work that I want to leave you to mull over.
Oh, please do.
If the human organism truly is a living battery, operating constantly within an invisible, highly impressionable cosmic fluid, then it stands to reason that every single thought you hold, every rigid intellectual fixation, and every unchecked emotional outburst is not happening in a vacuum.
Right.
You are actively generating a magnetic field in real time.
Every mood is a frequency being broadcast into the astral light.
Exactly. So the question you must ask yourself is this. What unseen forces, what new opportunities, or what destructive chaos are you unconsciously attracting or actively repelling into your life right now, purely based on the voltage of your internal balance today? Are your circuits harmonized and receptive, or is your internal battery leaking acid and collapsing its own field?
That is a deeply unsettling yet incredibly empowering thought to end on. You are the battery, and your will holds the controller. Keep your voltage balanced, everyone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.